Sometimes you watch an apologetics video and think that the apologist almost gets it. Almost. That if they just take that last step, they could free themselves from the mental shackles of blind faith and fanatical adherence to religious absurdity. Alas, it almost never happens that way, and we're left with more ridiculous religious blathering that should be worthwhile. It just isn't. So let's go look at Ben Pearsall's claims of evidence he has for an unprovable deity.
So there's an interesting story about two evangelists, Billy Graham and Charles Templeton. Both men were gifted speakers and drew crowds in the thousands to their meetings. In fact, Charles Templeton had 91,000 people come out to hear him speak.
That might be true, but you have to remember lots of people turned out to see speakers like Jim Jones or David Koresh or Adolf Hitler speak too. I'm not trying to Godwin this discussion. I'm just pointing out that the quantity of attendees doesn't automatically make the quality of the speech worthwhile.
But in 1948, both men were faced with different philosophical criticisms regarding the Bible, and Billy Graham responded after much prayer and said, "I don't know how to answer all the questions that the critics are asking me, but I'm going to choose to allow faith to go beyond my doubts, and I'm simply going to believe."
And that isn't anything that any rational person ought to be proud of. The idea that you cannot intellectually justify anything that you believe, that you can see the problems, the errors, the faults, and you're still going to believe anyway, that's not the sign of a well mind. It's the sign of a fanatic.
Templeton, faced with these same questions, enrolled at Princeton Theological Seminary and less than a decade later declared himself an agnostic. In 1996, he wrote his memoir called Farewell to God, My Reasons for Rejecting the Christian Faith. Later in his 80s, in an interview about Jesus, Templeton responded and said he was the greatest human being who ever lived. As his voice began to shake and tears filled his eyes, he said, "I miss him."
Whereas Templeton took the path of the skeptic, he asked questions, and where those logical answers were not forthcoming, he rejected the ideas that couldn't be rationally justified. Yes, maybe he missed the comfort that the idea of Jesus provided. Maybe it was emotionally hopeful to think that there was a God out there somewhere, but Templeton never threw up his hands and said, "Screw it, I'm going to believe anyway." He was an intelligent, rational, skeptical individual who actually cared if his beliefs were factually justifiable. He found that his belief in God was not.
I think this story holds significant weight for me as a Christian because it addresses something at our core that I think, if we're honest, most of us are really intimidated by, and that's belief.
But you're not. You might be intimidated by blind, empty faith for the sake of feeling good about things, but you're not actually intimidated by belief. If you were, you wouldn't cling to it so desperately. You wouldn't turn a blind eye to all of the logical arguments and objective evidence that shows that your God isn't necessary. You'd actually give a damn about what is true, above and beyond your wishful thinking and irrational dreams. That uncomfortable feeling that you're experiencing isn't intimidation. It's the rational side of you that takes precedence in so many other parts of your life, recognizing that this little walled-off section called religion is complete and total nonsense.
You know, we admire the faith of individuals in overcoming impossible odds and circumstances, but when it comes to our own lives, we're often quick to dismiss belief in something greater than ourselves as just not being realistic.
And that's because it isn't. Somewhere deep inside, I think a lot of theists know that what they believe is nonsense. They know it doesn't make any sense. They've been indoctrinated not only to believe this garbage, but to feel guilty if they ever dare to question it. They're not allowed to seek the truth. They are required by the religion that has polluted their minds to demand that it has to be true, whether or not it actually is.
I mean, we feel foolish. How can I give an answer for faith in a God who is invisible from my sight? But yet when you look at the complexity and the beauty of life, it seems that there's nothing but fingerprints of design in every aspect of the world that we live in. So what in essence is forced upon us is a choice of belief or unbelief.
No, what is forced upon you is a choice between emotionally coddling fantasy and reality. You're terrified to be like Templeton, to follow the evidence where it leads instead of demanding that all roads lead to emotional comfort. I wasn't, however. I was determined to find the truth no matter where my journey took me. I was completely convinced at the time that I'd find myself on the side of God. But as it happened, when I stopped being mindlessly faithful, I found that there just was no good reason to think that God actually exists. All of the lies about design and the falsehoods that your religion has shoved into your head, they're all ridiculous once you actually give up blind belief and start caring about what's actually true. And that's what scares you.
Jesus said in John 14, verse 6, that I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. In essence, what he's saying here is that no religion is the way, no religion is the truth, nor is it the life, not even the one that you're practicing. What gets you to God is not religion. It's a relationship with Jesus. Religion is helpful only to the extent that it serves this higher purpose. The way, the truth, and the life has never been about Christianity, about right and wrong, following all the rules, or even morality. It's always been and will always be about simply knowing Jesus.
Yet there you go again, back to your blind obedience. How do you know there's a God? Where is your evidence? Of course, we know you have none. You just have this emotional desire for a father figure that watches over you and ultimately takes care of you whether such a figure actually exists or not. You're unwilling to take that last step and wonder if such a thing is really so, even though you lay out the path for people to take to abandon these unrealistic and irrational beliefs that you hold. People like him are the worst enemies to their religious beliefs because they really have no reason to cling to these beliefs. They just refuse to take that last step that will free them from them.
I love what Charles Spurgeon once said, in that we will never find happiness by looking at our prayers, our doings, or our feelings. It is who Jesus is, not who we are, that gives rest to the soul.
Spurgeon was half right when he said that people will never find happiness through those things. They will also not find happiness through their blind faith. It's the idea that someone cares for you, even if that person isn't real, that matters, and it's not the sign of a healthy individual, it's the sign of a sick and delusional mind.
I think back to 9/11, when churches across the country were packed with people seeking God in the face of tragedy. And we do this. We often turn to God when we feel like He is our last hope. But what ends up happening is we hoist our prayers towards heaven as if we were picking a lottery ticket, hoping God hears us, hoping that we get an answer. When the fact is that God told us He would never leave us or forsake us. He's been there with you the entire time with arms wide open. The Bible says, you will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart.
Yet, whether anyone likes it or not, nobody ever finds God. Not in any demonstrable way. Oh, sure, you get theists who claim that God found their car keys or that God talks to them, but they aren't willing to consider the very real possibility that they're just carrying on an internal monologue with themselves. Nobody finds God because, based on every shred of evidence we have, there is no God to find. It's a security blanket, carried around so that the world doesn't seem so scary. It isn't anything real. It's pure and unadulterated fantasy for those without the backbone to stand up on their own 2 feet.
He's calling you. It's His presence. The furiousness of His love towards you. His one desire is a relationship with you.
If that's the case, why does God hide from everyone? Why not just pop out and prove without a shadow of a doubt that He's real? Why all these coy games? It's because these claims are empty. There isn't any reason to think that any gods exist at all. Not Yahweh, not Allah, not Krishna, not Zeus, not Aphrodite, none of them. We've got no reason to think that any of them exist or that any of them want a personal relationship with humanity. For the rational among us, we only want a personal relationship with reality, and that's really all that matters.
So we all have the same questions. Why don't you ask God to reveal Himself to you? And He will.
And what if he doesn't? Because don't you think that atheists worldwide have done that and gotten nothing in return? Christians just make mindless excuses. We weren't serious. We didn't try hard enough. We didn't really believe. But the reality is, and the option they refuse to consider, that there's nothing actually there to begin with. All the wishes and dreams and hopes and fantasies in the world won't make something come into being that wasn't real in the first place. He acknowledges that religion isn't important, that hopes aren't important, and that those who consider reality on reality's terms like Templeton just don't remain religious. He's so close to getting it right. He's one step from being on the right path. Try a little harder. I know you can do it. Thanks for spending some time with me. It's a shame that people like this are the real worst enemies of religion, yet can't see the forest through the trees. I should have a new video up real soon. I hope you'll come back for it. Comments, suggestions, and useful criticism belong below. And if you like what I'm doing, like and subscribe and tell everyone you know so that we can spread the intelligence. Goodness knows this planet could use it.